During the past week, I have been involved in various philanthropic activities with a small production company, and one of them was particularly memorable. Our commitment was to fulfill the wish of a girl battling cancer, to turn her original song into a music video through Make-A-Wish. Every detail was carefully planned to ensure the young girl's safety, reserving a panoramic section in the park, away from any crowds. Throughout the day, some people questioned the reservation of the picnic area, not fully understanding the situation. However, witnessing the joy of the teenage girl, aged 14 or 15, recording scenes for the music video, made any complaints dissipate. It was in this setting that Karen emerged, a woman adorned with cheap Botox and dressed in expensive sports accessories, accompanied by her young daughter. Our production assistant, RPA, promptly ran to explain discreetly to Karen that we were on a private film set. Karen, however, ignored the clear indications and loudly claimed it was a public park, defending her right to occupy any part of the space. The situation became somewhat uncomfortable, requiring a delicate intervention. We had city permission to be there, and when we informed Karen about it, she resisted. We warned her to calm down or choose to leave, as we had the right to reject her if she interfered with the filming. We didn't want to cause trouble or involve the authorities, but Karen remained inflexible. The director decided to pause the filming to try to ease tensions. While there was a scheduled Make-A-Wish style conference call, the catering manager got lost on the way to the park. Karen, on the other hand, tried to persuade her daughter to sing, even in the face of the child's hesitation. The situation escalated when Karen started playing Disney songs on her phone, encouraging the child to sing amid the interruption of the filming. Finally, the director intervened, showing Karen that although she had technically left the physically reserved area, our permit gave us the right to continue. The challenge was to maintain the positivity of the event without compromising the experience of the young patient. The commotion caused by her and her daughter was so disturbing that he could have requested their removal, although I'm not sure if that actually happened. However, it seems he acted correctly in assuming that calling 911 to report the harassment of a young cancer patient trying to experience her Make-A-Wish day wouldn't end favorably for Karen. Even so, Karen's pride prevented her from simply walking away from the situation. After Karen's daughter stopped singing loudly and off-key, she continued to stay on site, ignoring her son's pleas for her to go play by a lake nearly 400 meters away. Karen tried to force her daughter to film, hoping it would elicit a cruel reaction from us, feeding her children's hopes and causing disruption repeatedly. It seems the child was not particularly insightful either, as she repeatedly said things like, "Look, dear, they're making a quick movie, go over there and become famous quickly." The girl ran towards our sets, but team members stopped her or returned her to her mother before she could cross the filming. Karen's daughter's cries of disappointment for not becoming famous every time we returned her to her mother made most of the filming, if not entirely useless, at least much less fun than it should be. Karen, probably thinking we couldn't hear her attempts to incite her son to disturb us with false promises of fame, acted oblivious when the director gave the final warning. She suggested with false sweetness and a clear imagination of authority that we should move because that was the only picnic area in the park. The director, avoiding calling the police to avoid creating a commotion, asked some crew members to keep her away. When the contact finally returned, Cameron deduced that she was the person in charge and awaited by everyone to take action. Surprisingly, Karen instantly calmed down when she realized the team was ready to act. In the end, the contact wasn't particularly helpful, and Cameron, realizing his influence, managed to navigate the situation. While we were filming a supporting dancer scene, the video's main girl was busy doing her makeup and didn't notice most of the chaos. She didn't mind, as Karen was with her young son, and the little girl, who believed she was a celebrity, kept waving and blinking at her. It was a cute gesture and perfect to complement the music video. Despite Karen's murmurs trying to overcome the situation, unknowingly, most people in the area were somehow affiliated with our filming. Karen found only one or two people annoyed with the picnic area closure, but they were a minority in the overall context. Misguidedly believing that we were just a greedy private party excluding other guests, people around later realized we were involved in a film production. They began to wander out of idle curiosity, while we were mainly focused on filming supporting dancers at that moment, including some friends. I give credit to Karen because, if she wasn't paying much attention to the filming itself, maybe it wasn't immediately obvious what exactly we were doing at that moment. However, what she did next is far from acceptable. Karen made occasional comments to the picnic people, winning a few of them over. She expressed opinions like, "Oh, but they need a whole space," receiving affirmative nods. I don't believe the other people were really paying attention, busy waiting for some celebrity to appear in the music video. Our tech team determined she wasn't interfering with the audio, so we chose to ignore her as long as she stayed out of the way. Then, the main star appears for an exciting dance performance, giving it her all. However, Karen decides to deliver another blow, turning to the nearest woman and saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh God, it's one of those girls who thinks it's cool to pretend to be a boy." I bet she didn't stop to consider how long it will take for our hair to grow back. Karen didn't realize, or perhaps consciously ignored, that the girl might be facing a health challenge. Our poor main girl hears this and breaks into tears, mistakenly assuming that the crowds were there not because they thought she was a famous pop star, but rather to gawk at her unique appearance. She runs away crying, and those close to Karen rush to make it clear that they are not associated with her. It was at this moment that the contact realized Karen's inappropriate behavior, alerted by several family members of the girl and some civilians who supported her. Karen didn't even try to apologize, simply fleeing as fast as possible, suggesting we could find a different place, as if she were doing us a special favor. Fortunately, the main girl was comforted by her family and supported by some civilians who showed genuine curiosity about the film set. They appreciated watching her dance, providing a moment of joy again after Karen's departure. However, it was a painful and inappropriate spectacle. If Karen got nervous at a picnic table, I can only imagine how it will be when her daughter faces life's true challenges. Regardless of whether Karen knew that the star girl had cancer or not, respect and empathy should have prevailed, as advocated by the author of the original post. Why would she feel entitled to make comments about the girl's appearance loudly enough for her to hear while trying to film her video? This is blatantly painful. I don't believe any reasonable person would expect that, by expressing such comments, the production would immediately halt its filming and move to another location. Even considering that we already had an entire film crew positioned in this location, that was not our mindset. Karen was clearly upset that she didn't get what she wanted and dealt an emotional blow to this Make-A-Wish girl who sought to fulfill her day. If this girl were someone you love, like a family member or a younger sister, how would you have handled this situation? Let me know below. They accepted my payment, so I agreed with their company. Here's what happened many years ago. I landed a job at a marketing company during the deregulation of the phone industry. It was a Wild West period, with various small long-distance companies emerging, all trying to get a piece of the pie. Eventually, they were all acquired by big corporations, but at the time, they were all generously paying hired gun marketing companies to secure contracts. I worked with one of those marketing companies, a company from the new era of capitalism that insisted everyone do yoga and breathing exercises while ringing a bell and feeding us affirmations about how many contracts we would sell and how much money we would make. They offered 100% commission, and I had always been good at sales. Observing the exponential pay scale, presumably to motivate people with challenging payments, I decided to try it for a week to see how much I could earn before deciding if I could endure the bland vegan snacks and mandatory voluntary yoga regimen. I dedicated myself intensely for 7 consecutive days, working 14 hours a day. I used all the tricks and techniques learned over the years to secure as many contracts as possible. I thought this would indicate my maximum possible income and allow me to decide if I would stay after that week. Surprisingly, not only did I surpass expectations, achieving more contracts than anyone else in a week, but also more than anyone had seen in a month. Due to the exponential scale, I realized I was earning absurd sums, over $10,000 per week. However, my excitement was frustrated when, expecting a large payment, I received only 5% of what I expected. There were issues with many of my contracts, and they allowed me to fix and resubmit them in the following weeks. These issues were things like a misplaced apostrophe or a slightly crooked dash in the phone number. That night, they tried to undermine me, receiving a call from the office manager, Frank, who wanted to meet for a drink. Interestingly, I agreed to have a few beers with Frank. He told me that the company owners were in a panic, believing that I had bankrupted them. According to Frank, they spread all my contracts on the office floor, examining each one meticulously in hopes of finding signs of fraud. Realizing that all my contracts were legitimate, they decided they had no choice but to take action against me. It was at that moment that Frank realized that by doing this to me, they could do the same to him. Moreover, he was tired of participating in the mandatory yoga sessions. Frank proposed the idea of doing business together, confronting the company bosses directly. Intriguingly, I asked how he envisioned we could compete. He explained that he found out the company didn't have the contract for our city, acting as independent contractors for another company that held the contract in a completely different city. They were hunting for clients here because the person with the contract wasn't actively using it. We drafted a proposal and approached the real contract holder, Joe, informing him about people encroaching on his territory. We agreed to split the profits, take the initial money for each contract, and Joe would receive the final amount in the future. It was a mutually beneficial deal. Joe contacted the telephone company, threatening to sue the poachers if they didn't stop. A week later, Frank and I walked into our former employer's office. Most of the furniture and all the yoga mats were gone. Only a desk, some files, and a file box with final payment envelopes remained. I made a display, counting my money to ensure it was all there. The two owners, husband and wife, bitterly told Frank and me that they had resorted to cash advances on their credit cards to deal with this. They asked if I felt guilty for ruining their lives. I smiled and said no. I left behind the marketing company that earned us a lot of money throughout the year, until it was bought by Sprint and the boom period came to an end. Now, I'm considered foolish for seeking revenge against this company that tried to deny me a significant commission. I can't understand why they would structure the commission system exponentially but be unable to make the payment, even if it were exponential. They did it in a way that increased from 10% of contracts to 20%, up to a maximum of 100%. At least this way, they wouldn't profit from that specific contract, but they would have the ability to pay what they owed me. However, they didn't. Their greed led them to try to create the illusion that they were paying much more than the contract was worth. This doesn't make sense, as that's a scenario they wouldn't desire. If they're trying to inspire someone to do something, it's expected that they would want the outcome of that feat. How would you handle this if you were earning $10,000 a week in commissions, working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they tried not to pay what you deserve? Let me know below. Am I a fool or not a fool, and why? When informing my mother that she can't get married within 2 or 3 months after my wedding, my fiancé and I got engaged last year and plan to marry this spring. My mother has been in a relationship for 15 years, and it's never been clear if they would marry due to other family dynamics, both being divorced. My stepfather casually proposed to my mother, mentioning it in early 2021. However, they didn't proceed with any definite plans. When I got engaged last year, my fiancé took me to choose the rings, and I shared possible photos with my mother. However, we ended up choosing a custom-made ring. The following week, my mother bought an engagement ring for herself and only told me on the day she received it. Although hers was more generic, it was probably even more expensive, as she got it just a week after mine, which was being made from scratch. I received mine several months later. At the time, my fiancé and I found it somewhat distressing, as it was strange that she got hers exactly when I was choosing mine. It was a bit disappointing that she got hers first, but we decided not to say anything. Over the next year, she made no plans for her own wedding, while I planned mine in detail. I shared with her about my fiancé and showed wedding bands in the past weekends. Recently, I sent her some possible photos of ideas I had. When I asked about her weekend, she mentioned that she and her fiancé bought their wedding bands this weekend. We were shocked, as they deliberately bought rings right when I said we were looking again. My fiancé believes I should tell my mother that she is not allowed to get married for 2 or 3 months on each side of our wedding. He is concerned that, as she continued copying my choices, she will do it again on the wedding day itself. Although I agree with him, I know I can't control their actions. Moreover, I have a very close relationship with my mother, and I believe she did these things thoughtlessly, not maliciously. I might seem foolish if I ask her not to get married near my wedding. However, before deciding, a few updates. Some people suggested that maybe 2 or 3 months are too long. Also, I would probably ask instead of telling if I decided to address the issue. Maybe I should have included this information from the start, but to be honest, I hadn't even considered why we didn't want them to get married near us due to financial issues in the family dynamic. Some other family members don't support the idea of them getting married, which will certainly cause discomfort and arguments for a few weeks. I really want everyone to get along at my wedding. Jumping to a final update in the future, I think I will just ask her when she is thinking of getting married. I know I can't control when she does it, and I'm not the owner of the dates. However, I don't think that should stop me from asking her to consider avoiding the period near my wedding as a gesture of goodwill. She has made other uncomfortable comments, like joking about borrowing my wedding dress, so there are other things that make me uncomfortable. She mentioned the idea of just going to the courthouse and having a meal afterward. It seems like something that can be planned on short notice, and that's why I'm apprehensive that she might decide to do it on the spur of the moment, very close to my own wedding. For those suggesting giving a false wedding date, I understand that some people plan weddings in 6 months, but most are planned at least a year in advance. Currently, we sent out the save the dates in September, so that suggestion wouldn't be feasible. Moreover, lying to her to try to manipulate her into avoiding my event seems even worse than openly discussing my feelings with her. In that case, I would be the fool for telling my mother that she can't get married within 2 or 3 months of my wedding. If my fiancé asks his mother not to do this, and she agrees by saying okay, no problem, I'll get married exactly 4 months after your wedding or 4 months before, her reasoning that family dynamics will cause bad moods and fights for at least a few weeks with other family members doesn't make much sense to me. Even if it's true, why would that impact our wedding, and why is a 2 to 3 month gap exactly what's needed for it to disappear, while 4 months is clear? Each family is different, with its own dynamics, and I just don't understand how those dynamics would be relevant to her wedding. After reflecting on this, I realized that the first step should be just asking my mother, hey, when do you plan to get married? What's your vision regarding this? From that point, I can start a conversation and explain why it's important to me, even if it doesn't make sense to her. If she cares about me, she will probably listen and understand. However, the idea of creating a false wedding day, as some people suggested, definitely seems like the wrong path to take. I want to know your opinion on this. Do you think it's a major concern or not? Would I be a fool in this situation, and why? When signing up, don't forget to hit the bell to activate notifications. I count on your participation to hear all the stories in this series, using the playlist at the top of the description. I appreciate everyone who followed this video to the end on the Reddit channel. If you enjoyed the content, please share it with friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe, leave your like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any episodes. Thank you for the support, and until the next story.